morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, Jacksonville's leading educator on diversity, equity, and inclusion reflects on how much and how little has changed in our national conversation around race. Later in the program, a profane and claustrophobic take on the American dream. We preview a local production of a classic David Mamet play. But first, St. John's Episcopal Cathedral celebrates this month's Juneteenth observance with a night of unity and reflection. And the event's keynote speaker says there is much to reflect on. Joining me to talk about it is Dr. Tammy Hodo, founder of the training and consulting company All Things Diverse. Dr. Hodo, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Ann.
So I want to start by asking you a little about your personal experience. It was the subject of a TED Talk that you gave, but it still really informs your worldview. Can you tell us just a little bit about your own personal background?
Sure. So I did the TED Talk actually about my personal background. My mother is German, English, and Welsh, and my father was African American. He's passed away, so I'm what they would consider biracial. And I spoke about race not being biologically real, because if it were biologically real, obviously my parents could not procreate. And so my personal background, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is the third most segregated metropolitan statistical area in America. But I grew up on what Americans would say the white side of town. So all the schools that I attended, most of my friends and most of my teachers were European American. Sexism. And I learned there that in America, I am African American. They totally, completely take out, the other half of who you are, or at least people attempt to. And I think about President Obama. That's what they say. Well, we had our first black president. No, we didn't. We had our first biracial or multi-ethnic president. The reality is that we are all ethnic beings. You're Irish, Polish, Italian, or you're African American or part of the African diaspora, or you're Hispanic. But race is not real. It's a social construct that is very much embedded in American institutions to keep a system of stratification in some type of hierarchy.
And so your parents actually married before the landmark Supreme Court decision, Loving versus Virginia, which essentially legalized interracial marriage. And so at the time that your parents married, that was not legal under that state's law. And your mother actually was disowned by some family members.
Yes. My parents married in 1962 in Wisconsin. They could not get married in a church. They actually went to three different judges at the courthouse before one would marry them, because they kept the judges were European American or white. And they kept explaining to my mom that they didn't think she had really thought this through, that maybe she didn't understand the ramifications that could come for this, and had she thought about if and when they had children. My mother's father, when she called and told him her plans, brought her suitcase with her belongings and a substantial amount of money, and told her that she no longer belonged to the family. Her sister, who was several years older than her, also disowned her. My grandmother, being to me the standard woman, when we began to arrive, when my parents began to have children, she began to come around.
For her grandchildren.
Yes, she did.
But that rift remained with the other family members?
Yes, I never met my maternal grandfather.
Uh-huh. And what did your mom tell you about her thoughts at that time when people were saying, do you understand the ramifications if you have children?
She understood, and her thing was love is love. And she loved my dad. They met, they fell in love. I know it wasn't his intent, to seek out a European American woman. It just took place. They met, they fell in love, they married, they had three children, and I'm the youngest of those three.
In your TED Talk, you discussed the fact that some people try to disavow the existence of white privilege, and you explained that it exists. Can you tell us a little bit about that part of your speech? You know it exists because you enjoyed it.
Right. So growing up in a predominantly white space with a white mother, who, by the way, is blonde hair, blue-eyed, we enjoyed privilege. So anytime anything needed to take place, whether it would be us getting a new house, being registered in school, anything like that, my mother was the one to take care of that. I actually wanted to go to a more diverse high school. I didn't want to go because we used the neighborhood school model to the high school I was assigned to because I lacked the diversity and I wanted more experience. And so my mother had to go to the school outside of our district to sign me up. And we had a white administrator explain to my mother that they had met their quota for African American students. And my mother explained to that administrator that she could just mark me down as white. And the administrator told my mom she couldn't do that because I was not. And my mother proceeded to explain to her how I came out of her birth canal and she nursed me. And so I was indeed white. And so I graduated from that school.
That's so interesting. So she was saying, we could go either way with this designation, and the administrator was saying, no, you can't. And she
Exactly.
said, yeah, we can.
Yeah. And I mean, I just saw how my mother was able to move within certain systems. And that's when I realized when I was in the Navy and I tried to move and maneuver the same way that she did and emulate her behavior, that in America, race is real and that I am African American and that is the perception. And I will be treated by some who believe in that ideology as less than.
So that privilege didn't attach when you moved away and were no longer in that neighborhood.
And that's exactly when I found out when I was in the Navy that her privilege did not transfer to me because I have the beautiful melanated skin. And that right there was an indicator that I should not be allowed to have that privilege.
So I want to ask you about that because you say, you realize race is real. Race also is not real. Explain to us, is real as a concept, as something that people intuit or interpret or feel like they see with their eyes, but not in a biological sense.
Right. So race is not real, but we have different phenotypes, right? So those who are born closer to the equator, you have a darker complexion because it protects you from the sun's UV rays.
And a phenotype being something you can see with your eyes.
Exactly.
Visual.
Physically, though, if you think about it, I could give you a kidney, you could give me, part of your liver because it's going to depend on the biological match, nothing to do with the phenotype or how we present.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So you, went off into the military, then you went and received, a formal education, kind of several, an advanced degree. And you have gone on to identify, publicly as your personality as biracial.
Mhm.
Um, do you find that definition is difficult to present when you're also talking about the lack of existence of race? What terms do you prefer, or is that the best?
I like multi-ethnic
Hmm.
because we're all ethnic beings. And so that's how I identify. We lived in Europe for 6 years as well. And it was interesting. I lived in Germany. And if you came into my village and you asked, what was the Swatza family? Where does the Black family live? They would look at you and not know. But if you ask where the Americans live, they would point you to our home.
Mhm.
So race is a social construct, but it's very much embedded in everything in America. And it was so refreshing when we lived in Europe because it was a non-issue. And my son, who was born there and first language was Deutsch, when we got ready to come back to the States, I had to sit down and have a conversation with him about how he would be perceived here versus how he was able to navigate and engage in the German community with no issues.
So the work that you do now professionally is training people, often in workplaces, sometimes in other, settings, how to interact in a civil fashion, how to interact in a productive way. And, some of that involves helping people understand issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion, three letters that have become now associated with a lot of backlash. But I want to ask you, when you hear from people who say that they object to DEI initiatives, what is your response to that?
So DEI has become weaponized, very much politicized. And so I asked them what component of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I want us to talk about that, not DEI. Let me know about what component of diversity, equity, and inclusion bothers you. Is it that little Johnny needs an individual educational plan because he's dyslexic? Or is it someone like me who's a disabled veteran who may need a stand-up desk in order to be able to complete my task for the day? Or does it bother you that we have ramps for people who are in wheelchairs? Or, things like that, and try to get them to understand that it's not this issue of the social construct of race. And the reality is, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the primary benefactors have been European American women. It's no different than affirmative action those were the primary benefactors. The biggest competition I tend to have within my field is by European American women owned businesses. And
In diversity training.
in diversity training, which is amazing to me because I experience intersectionality, which is a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw that just recognizes not only am I a woman, which we know tend to be marginalized, but I'm also a woman of color. So I have those two additional barriers, that I'm having to address when I'm in different spaces.
And Kimberly Crenshaw talks about, for instance, if you work at a factory, you might face, a predominantly male workforce as a woman and experience a certain kind of exclusion or discrimination. But you might, if you're, for instance, a black woman working at a predominantly white factory, experience a different level of exclusion based on race, and that those two together can actually compound that experience.
Exactly, and I mean, I've experienced that in academia. I've experienced it throughout my entire professional life, where maybe a white woman or European American woman would be considered assertive or maybe something negative. As a woman of color, I would be considered angry, or my Hispanic sisters would be considered spicy. They have these different terms they use for different people that are women who are very much just career driven and goal oriented.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Dr. Tammy Hodo ahead of her appearance at a local observance of the Juneteenth holiday. We're talking about the work that she does on the education front. You can join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. I want to ask you, when you ask people to break down their individual objections to DEI, when you say to them, what is it specifically that you object to? Is it an IEP? Is it veterans benefits? What do you typically hear back from people? Do you find that there is something that they specifically object to, or are they kind of envisioning a definition of DEI that maybe doesn't accord with reality?
That's exactly that. It's the latter. I find that people think they think DEI, and again, I like to stress, let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But they think that DEI basically is a way for minorities to get put in positions that they're actually not qualified for. And that's illegal. And you can't do that. And there's no such thing as a quota system. I find that we have a lot of cognitive dissonance in America. We are very much still hyper segregated. We tend to live with people who look like us, or are in the same social economic status. And the reality in America is, although race is a social construct, it has a direct correlation to social economic status due to historical policies and practices. And so that lack of engagement with one another creates this ideal that, for some reason, this one group is getting ahead of another when that's not the truth. Derek Bell, one of the founding fathers of critical race theory, along with Kimberly Crenshaw, came up with the concept of entrance convergence. And that is a principle of social change. And he talked about social change for minority groups occurs when their interests align with those of the majority group, so European Americans. And so there has never been a law in America that has specifically benefited people of color, but they tend to listen to these sound bites and they get very engaged in that, and they get, very hyped up with misinformation. And then they go on and they spew and share this inaccurate information.
What would you say to people who, feel like they perhaps their heart's in the right place, but that the conversations around race got complicated in a way that made them just feel like they couldn't openly discuss things, that they were being hindered, or that they were being perhaps corrected in their interactions in a way that was just difficult?
Right. I would say that it depends on who the trainer and who you're speaking to. So when I come into the classroom, or any of the trainers that I have, and we do have 14 for all things diverse, they come in and we establish ground rules, and we talk about, leading with I statements, and we talk about empathy, and we talk about recognizing mercy and grace, and that people are starting this journey at different points. And that the point of these courses is never, or conversations about guilt or shame. This is not something that you did, but these are institutional policies. So I'm very policy driven. So I like to bring up, like the Indian Removal Act, housing covenants and redlining, Japanese internment camps. The first racist or ethnic um, discriminatory law was the Chinese Exclusionary Act. And so that's very much where I drive, our training from is from a policy aspect. This isn't something I think as a philosopher. This is actual government policy that was put in place that hindered particular groups. Think about women. Women in some states didn't get the right to have their own credit until the 1970s. In some states, they still had to have their father or their husband sign off in order for them to get credit cards.
And so, how did you personally get to a place where you're able to talk about these issues and have that grace? I mean, you've obviously experienced in your own life difficult, challenging situations built on, somebody's perceived racial assignation or the identity that they think that you belong to. So, how did you get to a place where this kind of training is something that you're even wanting to do or comfortable doing?
Right. So I have my doctorate, excuse me, from the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee in urban studies. My minor is sociology, but my specialization is in race, class, gender, and ethnicity because I know that, as Martin Luther King said, either we can learn to live together as brothers and sisters or we can perish as fools. And that is what I'm concerned about is just this very divisive conversation. And so I think it is part of my mission is to educate people and to let people know we actually have more commonalities than we do differences, but that we're all starting at different points and that we need to understand that that's like equality and equity. These are two very different concepts, but people use them interchangeably. Equality is thinking that, okay, well, we'll give everybody the exact same thing and they should make it. Where equity is recognizing that people are starting at different places. So little Johnny may need an IEP because he's dyslexic. Dr. Hodo may need that stand up desk in order to complete her assignments for that day. That doesn't take away from anyone else, but it's this ideal of a zero sum game that is the problem.
Have there been situations when you've been in a training, situation, or a training scenario that have been particularly difficult for you that you either have to prepare yourself for or perhaps extract yourself from and say, "One of my colleagues should maybe handle this particular, group." Anything that has been problematic for you like that?
Well, I do have a colleague, European American male, heterosexual, that when I know it's going to be one of those difficult conversations that I do bring him in, and all he does is echo what I've just said, but sometimes people need to hear it from people who look like them.
Mhm.
Because it just doesn't bode well. I tend to do pretty well though with male dominated fields because I am a service connected disabled vet. So when they tell me, "Well, you don't understand," I'm like, "No, actually I do."
Mhm.
So that part doesn't go over.
One of the things that you talked about in your TED talk, which I think is really interesting for a lot of people who maybe aren't as schooled in history, is how the definition of race has changed over time and who has been kind of let in, let out based on evolving definitions of, kind of those categories. Can you explain a little bit about, whether it's people from Mexico or early European immigrants, how they've been impacted and sometimes constrained by and then sometimes released from those racial definitions?
Oh, I will happily talk about that. So I would just like to shout out all my Polish, Irish, and Italian European ethnic groups out there as they were not considered or perceived to be white as when they initially came here. They were treated as less than, they were discriminated against. The largest mass lynching was of 12 Sicilian men in New Orleans. And we know, of course, racial terror lynching African Americans men were predominantly the group that was impacted, but the largest mass one was of Sicilian men. And I'm just always amazed at how quickly these groups have forgotten that initially they were considered the other, and now they've been absorbed into this construct of whiteness. And so I see people who have been oppressed are now becoming the oppressor. And I've seen that a lot, like within fire departments. A lot of Irish, Polish, and Italian were able to get into those positions as well as policing because these were perceived as not desirable jobs. And so they got in where they fit in, which makes perfect sense. But now I see them excluding others. And I'm not sure if their parents did not share the history or their grandparents about their experiences, but it's very evident as they try to lock others out of their system.
It's been now 5 years since the murder of George Floyd, and that was an incident that sparked a lot of deeper thought and conversations around issues of race and racial identity, but also diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and practices. How do you feel at this point seeing, first of all, the backlash that has ensued after a lot of those important conversations? And just, where do you see that going? Are we at where's the pendulum going? I guess, first of all, and how has that incident helped or complicated these kinds of conversations?
Well, initially with the murder of George Floyd, we all thought that okay, we're ready for racial reconciliation because that's something America has not had. And I thought, oh, we're ready to have these conversations. And what I believe has happened is that we were moving in the right direction, but then we began to get people in the conversation who were not really qualified. So people went on and they got certifications, maybe from Cornell, which is a great university, or the University of South Florida, and they had a free program for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and great rigor in the courses. But they came out of these programs and they began to build these businesses, and they were not providing people with empathy and grace, not recognizing that people are starting from different perspectives. And I think that really muddied the water and made people feel like you're attacking me. I don't think anyone who has ever taken any training from any of my colleagues, my peers, or my employees or myself would ever say that.
So, I mean, that's kind of within the training space, the professional, education space. But it seems that the backlash in the wake of the George Floyd murder and then kind of the national reckoning is much bigger than that, and perhaps much more visceral than that, and in some cases really hostile. And that can't all be from a kind of a training pool that is perhaps sullied or not as qualified as they should be. I mean, there's something else happening, is there not?
I would agree. I think that, to be quite frank, I think that people were not ready for minority excellence. They were not prepared. They did not know. I mean, African American women are the number one educated demographic in America. And so I think that people are there's white fragility that is taking place. People are afraid that they're going to lose their positionality, their level on the hierarchy. And so with that concern, we saw a lot of backlash, and that's when we got into conversations about people not being qualified for positions, and they were given them, which is not true. You can't do that. I mean, that's what EEO is for. That's why you're able to file suit.
And so, given that there has been this backlash, has the language that you use changed? Has your approach changed? Do you start to find yourself excluding the abbreviation DEI from the training that you're doing?
So, yes, we don't use DEI at all. We talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we talk about some of the terminologies that's changed is civility in the workplace, psychological safety, leading diverse teams, things of that nature, because we've had to change the terminology, but the concepts have not changed. But we've had to change the terminology because it's been so weaponized and politicized that if you say, well, yes, I own a diversity, equity, and inclusion firm, which I do own, but we do more than that. I mean, we do climate surveys, we do policy audits, we do focus groups. I've done a contract here with the city of Jacksonville, Safer Together, where we examine policing and the level of trust within different communities. And so I think it's an impactful and important conversation to have. And I think this backlash, again, is due to fear and fragility that people are jockeying for certain positions and they're afraid that they're going to lose them.
We've got a call from Mark on the South Side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I just want to ask your guest. I was unaware of the issue you brought up about the Italian lynching over in New Orleans. It's an interesting story. But after you mentioned that, you brought up the fact that largely the Italians have kind of assimilated into American society. And I think you kind of alluded to, I don't know if it's that their parents didn't educate them on what it was like for them when they were younger, but to me, I guess I look at that situation and I say, well, that is a success story. And so I'm curious, do you ever use that as a success story of how a group that at one point was uh, uh, discriminated against, wrongly accused of something, whatever, what have you. But now nobody, not only do they not largely know about the incident that you brought up, but they don't look at that group of people with any kind of prejudice or anything like that. And so to me, I think that's a success story to be taught, as opposed to one of wondering whether or not their parents shared with them their history.
Interesting question, Mark. Tammy.
Yeah. So, Mark, I think that is indeed an interesting question, but I would go back to they've been absorbed into the construct of whiteness. And so when I talk with people and I teach or I do what I do, I'll have people say, well, I'm white. And I explain to them that's a color. That's not an ethnicity. And so you don't necessarily know someone is Italian, Irish, or Polish unless they let you know or you know by their last name. And while I would agree in a sense that is a success story, for those of us with beautiful melanated skin, we're not going to get absorbed into that construct. And I think that's the important part that's missing.
Because that's not available in the same way,
Exactly.
at least at
That's
this point.
not at this point.
So I do want to talk about this event that you're going to be the keynote speaker at that's coming up. It's this Juneteenth celebration that's being put on by the Episcopal Cathedral, and you are one part of it. It is, June 14th on Saturday at 5 p.m. at the Cathedral. But, in addition to you, there's going to be a number of other offerings, including some great music and a couple of really impressive local civil rights activists.
Yes, yes. I'm so excited to be there. So I've worked with Cedric Williams, who is the actual director of the Jacksonville Gospel Chorale. And he's amazing. And so they will have a concert. And then Alton Yates and his wife Gwen will also be there. And they will be sharing about living the legacy, the story of Alton and Gwen Yates. And I, until I did my research, was unaware that Miss Yates actually was the founder of the Youth Crisis Center, and I am a board member of the Youth Crisis Center. I'm excited to hear their conversation next week, and I think it should be noted that Mr. Yates talked about, just like I did, he served in the military, but he actually did 32 years, but he was one of 7 who actually volunteered in the Air Force to risk his life for space exploration. And then when he drove home, when he got out and drove back from New Mexico to back to Jacksonville, how he experienced racism, in his uniform as he was making his way back. So I think it's a very pivotal point and very important for people to understand.
And we should say that Alton Yates and Gwen Yates are going to be on First Coast Connect talking about their book, Living the Legacy, on Tuesday. So that will be a great conversation. This event, though, we should say again, is on June 14th at 5 p.m. We do have a link on our website to the event, and Dr. Hodo will be a big part of that. So, Dr. Hodo, thanks for a preview. We appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Up next, a ruthless take on the unattainable American dream. welcome back. Kicking off the summer season of Lumen Repertory Theater's Subversive season is a classic play with some very current messages about economic anxiety and survival. And here to discuss it is Brian Neese, artistic director at Lumen Repertory Theater, who also plays the character Donnie. Good morning. Nice to have you, Brian.
Good to be here.
All right. We're also joined by David Alford, who is the actor playing Teach in American Buffalo. Good morning.
Hi.
Nice to have you. We're
Thanks.
also joined by WJCT's own digital media director, Ray Hollister, who is the founder and theater critic at Jack's Plays. Hey, Ray.
Hey, good morning.
So, Brian, this is the summertime version of the subversive season that Lumen Rep has been in the midst of. Tell us a little bit about American Buffalo and why it was an appropriate choice for the subversive season.
Well, it definitely heats things up for the summer. We started the season with a three-actor play that was all females and focused very much on questioning the mirrors we hold up to ourselves.
That was Agnes of God.
Agnes of God, yeah, very powerful, I think eventually uplifting piece of theater.
Yeah.
And this summer we have a three-actor play, David Mamet's American Buffalo, which is all males, and holds up a very realistic mirror to all of the ugliness, perhaps, that jealousy and loyalty and betrayal and sketchy friendship brings in the underbelly of society, even 50 years after it was written, still incredibly relevant.
What is the currency of a play like this, Ray? David Mamet obviously has, known for his incredible dialogue. Certainly a kind of, I think all of his plays are all men, right? They're kind of
Most of
a
them,
male-oriented
females, yeah.
artist, but incredibly powerful.
Well, it really holds up a mirror to what issues toxic masculinity can bring to culture and to the individuals themselves and what they have to deal with and express in their own personal life.
Because they're wrestling with conflict among one another,
Yeah.
and also, battling with issues like betrayal, friendship. But a lot
The
of that
nickel
is
is just an excuse to deal with their crap.
Well, explain to us the American buffalo in the title.
Sure.
It references a coin.
Yeah, it's a coin, and you guys are much more experienced or knowledgeable of that because they've been living in this text. But the idea is that a buffalo nickel is sold, and it's just a pawn shop, so it's just another thing that got sold. But then he starts to realize, wait a minute, maybe that was worth a lot more than I realized.
The shop owner that
yeah.
Brian plays.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what ensues, David? This becomes your character is kind of a
Right.
catalyst, I would say, in this
Right.
drama.
Yeah, I play Teach. The idea is that all of these people are sort of on the underside of acceptability in society. They're really scrambling. They're hustling. They're trying to make a living any way they possibly can. And my character, Teach, is somebody who's definitely sort of on the margins, and he sees an opportunity to maybe make a score, right, with this nickel and to help Donnie go in and sort of steal this coin back, along with whatever else this coin collector guy might have that they've identified as what they call the mark, right? This is the mark. One of the things that Mamet does so well is capture the dialogue and the way people communicate with each other sort of on the underside of society. People who are living on the edge, especially we're talking about the mid-1970s, so it's a very different time.
Can't you tell by the facial hair? We're talking about 75.
We're talking about the mid-1970s, and these people are sketchy. And that's one of the things he captures. And one of the things that's so great for audiences to come and see is to watch people behaving badly.
Yeah.
I think many of us like that,
Yeah.
right? And Mamet was incredibly influential for writers like Martin McDonagh and, of course, Quentin Tarantino. This kind of the way people talk to each other, aggressives, hypermasculinity, and also, but just behaving in questionable ways,
Yeah.
right? People like to see that. We all do.
Yeah. And a lot of people are familiar with Glengarry Glen Ross, which is another Mamet classic play.
And on
Yeah.
Broadway right now.
That's right.
That's
And back on Broadway. That's right. And there's some big names in it, right?
Yeah. Odenkirk and
Yeah.
a former child actor who escapes me now.
Right.
Oh,
So
shoot,
this is same thing. Language is very powerful in this. Is it hard to have such a magnetic script and deliver it in a fresh way? The language is so seductive in a way that it seems like you could kind of fall into a pattern with
Yeah,
it.
well, I mean, the beauty of bringing somebody like David and his talent back to Jacksonville, we're trying to raise the bar with what we present. And Mamet, we will either fail or succeed on the edge of a knife. If we fall into the rhythm correctly, it just sort of happens. If we've done our due diligence and preparation, the issue is when you try to think of something too precious that Mamet's like, no, just say it, just say the words,
Mm-hmm.
And you can probably speak more to that.
No,
than I
it's,
can.
well, it's catnip. I mean, for an
Yeah, yeah,
actor,
yeah, it
I mean,
is.
it's just so much fun.
He doesn't give line read in his
No.
his plays, right? He doesn't tell you how to deliver
No.
it or what
That's right.
expression you're wearing or kind of.
But he writes the pauses.
He writes the
and
pauses.
and we need to know the pause. It's like
Yeah.
Beckett. You have to pay attention to the rhythm.
For the layman out there who might be listening about theater, what was referencing is that very often in little parentheticals, little italics, sometimes writers will tell you how to say a line. They'll say angry or sad or crying. Mamet doesn't do any of that. There's none of that, but he does write in the pauses.
Yeah.
So, and he trusts the actors to find the meaning in all those pauses. And if you're doing it, and if you're talking to each other and really connecting, there's a kind of fire that happens when you're working together. And that's one of the reasons that people love to do this playwright, the actors do, because there's so much juice
There is.
and electricity if you start to capture that rhythm.
And you have to listen. The height of our craft is when you can listen well. And in Mamet, we don't find those authentic, organic moments unless we're listening to each other.
Yeah. Ray, what's the experience like watching a play like this for a theater goer?
Yeah.
And how is that going to play in the studio that it's actually going to be performed at here at WJCT?
So it's very much like being a fly on the wall. It doesn't feel as much as you're watching people recite a play and they're just going through the motions. It feels like you're in a pawn shop in the 70s. I mean, ironically, like we were talking about, like if it was set now, well, one of them would got on their iPhone and look up on eBay and say, "Oh yeah, it's not worth anything." Okay,
Into play.
Right.
Fortunately, it was set in the 70s, so there's a story. But yeah, so that natural language that you guys were talking about, the pauses that breathe and that have this momentum to them. It's part of the way we speak. Like it's part of how we talk. It's not as rehearsed and strict and rigid. It's just the way language happens and the way we express our thoughts and our feelings. So it creates this environment where you get to experience this moment and experience what they went through and what they felt, because it's like being there.
Yeah.
And speaking of the space, WJCT
Oh, yeah.
Studio B, we decided to embrace the immediacy of it. So when the audience walks in, they'll be walking through the pawn shop door.
Yeah.
We should say
Onto the
Studio
set.
B is a small kind
Small.
of black
Yeah, it is.
box theater.
Yeah, 50 people max per performance can watch this. But we are making the whole thing a pawn shop. And so they'll walk onto the set and be there, and they'll sit. Some of them may sit in pawn shop chairs.
Yeah. So a really immersive
performance.
experience, really make you feel like you're a part of it in there.
And who helped kind of design that concept to have it be in first of all, in that setting, that intimate theater setting, but also one that is you're kind of built into the set?
Well, Tyler Hammond, our co-director, and Claire Semino, our set designer, sort of embraced this idea of let's just get and also Cool Vintage Stuff. Have to give a shout out to them. The store down on King Street. We shot a promo video there, and he's basically giving us free reign to bring in some authentic 1970s junk into our junk store.
Nice. David, you've done, I mean, more than 40 productions, 70 professional theater roles. You've been in the TV series Nashville, the Blacklist, The Good Fight. You've been in a lot of, professional productions, and you were here for the Lumen production of Zoo Story by Edward Albee. But what is it that appeals to you about coming for this role particularly?
Well, there's a couple of things. Obviously, the chance to work with Brian again. I had a really good experience last summer, and Brian and I knew each other and worked with each other in Nashville for many, many years. So I trust Brian. I trust his vision. I really enjoyed the experience last time of working with the people. There's something aspirational and very cool about a new professional theater company. The things that Brian and everybody else that works with Lumen are trying to achieve, that's fun for me. I love to be a part of that energy, that fire. But also, as I said, Mamet is catnip. I mean, if you say, "Hey, do you want to play teach in American Buffalo?" But before he could finish, I said yes. I don't think he even got the the end of the words. Yes, I absolutely want to do that. Um, the challenge of a role like this, I think it's one of the great roles in American theater. Personally, it's a role that actors talk about. Like, I got a chance to play teach? Oh, cool.
Wow. Yeah.
It's that kind of role. And that kind of experience, and the way Brian laid it out, and the intimacy of the experience. So it's going to feel, theater and film are very different approaches for an actor. But this kind of it's definitely going to be theater because of the energy of it, but also the fact that we're in such a tight, small space. We're going to be able to really listen and behave and talk in what I hope will feel a naturalistic way, so that people will feel like they're a fly on the wall.
Brian, remind us what is different or unique about Lumen for people who aren't familiar with kind of your mission and your actual arrangement of actors and how they interact with you.
We're in our third season, and from the beginning, we've been fully professional, not for profit, equity affiliated theater company, which means we're affiliated with Actors Equity Association, the Union for Professional Actors and Stage Managers in the United States, and everyone gets paid on our productions, a fair, equitable wage. There are break times, there are days off. We approach it as a profession, and we want to not be the only ones in Northeast Florida eventually, so we can retain talent here and invest in that talent with money, resources, benefits, et cetera.
And one of the things that you offer is this Next Gen program, which is designed to kind of bring in young people who maybe aren't exposed to theater or maybe can't really afford a professional theater production.
Yeah, if we want to build audiences for the future, let's just take down all the barriers. And so you can go, if you are a student, high school or college student, the code NEXTGEN, all one word, capitals, you get a free ticket to come see any of our shows. Be forewarned, there is strong language and adult themes in this one.
Sure.
So this would be rated R, so get parental permission if you're under 18. But please come see us.
Ray, what are you most looking forward to?
In this show? Well, I mean, not to be redundant, but the experience of being there in that moment. I will brag a little bit on David. In Slow Burn, in Zoo Story, the thing that stood out to me the most is how just an expression could totally change the moment. He would really own the stage with just his tone and his expressions that were just chilling sometimes, and you could really feel like you're a part of what's happening.
Well, it will be an exciting performance. It runs from June 13th to June 28th, and you can get more info at lumenrep.org. Brian Neese, David Alford, Ray Hollister, thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, the owner of Springfield's Underground Farmers Market celebrates a seasonal shift to summer nights.
Museum of Science and History's new exhibition, Mosh Archives, The Story of Us and You, steps you into a treasure trove of memories, now through August 31st. Tickets and information at themosh.org. Congaree & Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com.
Broadway's biggest night is coming to Jacksonville. Join us Sunday, June 8th at 7:30 p.m. for a Tony Awards watch party. Celebrate the magic of live theater and the 2025 Tony Honor for Excellence awarded to PBS Great Performances. Enjoy the Tonys, live performances, trivia, refreshments, and a fabulous night out. Visit WJCT.org/events for tickets.
Animal testing is an integral part of biomedical research, but could it soon be obsolete?
It's cruel to the animals sometimes, it's unnecessary, and we live in a modern world where we have computational modeling using AI that can evaluate a molecule and predict its toxicity in humans better than the animal testing.
The future of animal testing. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the Trump administration will aggressively revoke visas from Chinese students. And new reporting says it's also considering vetting the social media accounts of those applying for a student visa. All while the administration wages a legal fight to keep Harvard from enrolling international students. How are those students feeling about their future? That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. The weekly underground market celebrates its new Springfield home with a summertime shift to nighttime hours and a brand new eatery. Here to tell us about it is Cameron Kirkland. He is the owner of Underground Events. Welcome.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
So you have a new home at 1352 North Main.
Yes, for the Underground Events and Eatery.
Describe this a little bit to us because not everybody's familiar with the layout.
Sure. So we started as just a mobile farmers and arts market, but now we have a 3-year lease in the space. The farmers and arts market's every Saturday from 4 to 9 p.m. Our grand opening is this Saturday. And we have a full service eatery now that's open full time Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 11:30. We're closed on Sundays and Mondays.
And you've been at that site now for a couple of months since April, right?
We've been, for about, April.
Okay. And so it's kind of a large lot. It's got a building on it. It might have even been like a car sales place at one point.
Yeah, a long time ago.
A long time ago.
But no, we have, it's a lot with a building. We have the kitchen, we have bathrooms, we have a full stage for when we put on special events. We're going to be doing more special events in the fall when it cools down a little bit.
Yeah.
So for now, we're just focusing on the farmers and arts market.
So the eatery is a big deal, and that's not just open on Saturdays. That's actually open throughout the week.
Correct. And we also have a beer and wine bar out of the eatery too, so we can serve. And we serve local beers. And but yeah, we're open Tuesday through Saturday. We serve hoagies and wraps, fries. What makes us unique though is like a lot of our produce, as long as it's in season, is sourced locally from organic farms. And also for our smoothies, we have a farm to table smoothie where our fruit is sourced from local farms as well.
Oh, excellent. So the farmers market's been a big component of this like mobile market that you do, the underground market.
Correct.
So the eatery is a big deal, and there is then a bunch of vendors, right? So there's all kinds of, there are produce vendors, but there's a bunch of craft vendors.
Yes, so for the farmers and arts market, we have 40 vendors every Saturday. We have jewelry makers, we have artisans, local artists, we have bakers, sweet and savory, organic farmers, salsas, and then we have some gourmet vendors as well.
So people can come if they're looking to snack, but they can also come like if they're going to shop for Father's Day or something and find something.
It's a great place for gift shopping.
Yeah. So it is getting hot. You've got, your vendors are covered. You've got seating there, but it's hot. So
it is hot.
What's happening over the summer?
So we were 11 to 4, but beginning this Saturday, which is our official grand opening ceremony this Saturday night, we're moving our hours to 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. to try to beat the summer heat.
Okay, so people can come out. And what all is on tap? I mean, it's the shopping, but there's also going to be some live music?
Yeah, so we'll have live music. This Saturday night, we'll have all of our vendors. Our eatery will be fully open, and our bar will be open.
Okay. It's a dog-friendly business.
It is a dog-friendly business and a family-friendly business.
Yeah, so if people are coming, I mean, should they be bringing something? Should they be having chairs and stuff? Or is it just kind of a...
we have picnic tables. We have high tops. We have seating covered.
Yeah, and so what about people who maybe want to join as vendors? Is that a difficult application process?
Not really. Our vendor applications, we accept vendors on a rolling basis. You can go to our website, and there's a section there on our website, theundergroundmarkets.com, where you can apply to be a vendor. You can also see all of our upcoming events on our website as well.
And what is your level of, interest in or commitment to the Springfield neighborhood? I mean, obviously that's an area that has seen, a resurgence in recent years, but it still has had some struggles to maintain like full occupancy sometimes, and to have tenants that are sticking around forever.
Right. Well, Springfield's been very welcoming to us. I love the Springfield neighborhood. I've always loved the Springfield neighborhood. And there's also another business opening in Springfield. So there is new blood coming in to Main Street, and I'm just excited to be part of their growth.
Yeah. And so where do you fit into the overall like streetscape of Main Street and to the identity, do you think, of Springfield?
Well, I think we bring something new. Springfield loves the idea of having a farmers and arts market there. That's something they do not have. And so before we were there was a business there that was a food truck park. And there's a lot of families in Springfield. And so that's what we've been trying to appeal to. Families are always looking for family-friendly activities to do. And since that business moved, we're kind of refilling that gap.
So one of the ways that people can sort of track what's going on with the underground market is your Instagram. Is that the best place for people to find information?
Instagram or our website or our Facebook. I keep them all updated. Instagram is Underground Market Jacks. Our Facebook is The Underground Jacks, and our website is theundergroundmarkets.com.
Well, Cameron, it is great that you've got this new home. I'm sure it's a thrill to not have to.
It's very exciting.
Pick up and move.
A lot of work,
every week.
but very exciting. Yes.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, Cameron Kirkland, appreciate you being here. Thanks for listening to you, and thanks for the calls that we got today. If you have any comments, suggestions, or feedback you want to send our way, you can send it all to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find our entire archive at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett, who's on vacation this week, and directed by Brady Corum. Our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Please join us tomorrow. And I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.
Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Museum of Science and History's new exhibition, Mosh Archives, The Story of Us and You, steps you into a treasure trove of memories now through August 31st. Tickets and information at themosh.org.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
International students have long been welcome at institutions like Harvard. Under President Trump, that could be changing fast. From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A. Hi, I'm Jen White. In the 2023 academic year, there were some 1.2 million